Okay. I just saw Shocker, and okay. All right. When I mean I just saw Shocker, I mean I just finished it about I don't know a minute ago, maybe 2 minutes ago. I set up the camera around halfway through the movie because I I knew as it was going on that by the time that I was done setting up the camera, I was going to have lost a lot of the anger that I had. I this is actually me stunned. Okay. Um where to start? I know where to start. Wes Craven. In the history of horror movies throughout the decades that the genre has been around, there have been a few directors and people involved in horror that have earned the reputation of horror masters. To list a couple of them, I've heard some people call Clive Barker a horror master, the director of Hellraiser, and contributed to the Candyman movies. I myself really like the first Hellraiser a lot. I think it's a great movie. Didn't really like Candyman all that much. Fix that. John Carpenter, one of my favorite directors of all time, definitely top 10. Um, he is a very good director of horror movies. The Thing is what I would call the second best horror movie I have ever seen. And another, I like the original Halloween a fair bit. I love Christine. Prince of Darkness, while it definitely has its problems, has some of the scariest stuff I think I've ever seen in a horror movie before. Takashi Miike, another director of horror movie. He's an Asian horror movie director, and the only movie of his that I've ever seen is Audition, the third best horror movie I've ever seen. Great movie to anybody that hasn't seen that. Fantastic. Easily, yeah, like I already said, third best horror movie I've ever seen. One of the best, probably ever. But Wes Craven has also been lumped into that category over time as one of the masters of horror. And yeah. To anybody who doesn't know Wes Craven at all, he is the director of. I'm gonna fix that strange thing. Okay, he is the director of a couple of. I'll just go through the horror movies of his that I've seen before, movies in general of his that I've seen. Let's go in order of when they were released. Last House on the Left from 1972. Now, I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion. Probably not to the extreme that I feel about the movie. If and I'm really not kidding when I say this, if I were to make a list of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, I really do mean this. Bottom 15, The Last House on the Left is in there. It is, without even the slightest shred of doubt, one of the most blitheringly incompetent films I have ever seen. And you know what? I get that it was made for like less than $1 million back in the early 70s. You know what? I've seen low budget movies before. I can see when people have talent. This guy did not have talent. He could not direct a scene. He cannot direct actors. Fuck no, he cannot direct actors in any of his fucking, well, okay, maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later. But in Last House on the Left, some of the most shockingly poor performances I've seen in any movie. A couple of the worst I've ever fucking seen. It cannot hold a tone. It is constantly cutting back between extreme farce with the dumb police officer cops and rape. Because isn't that, like, what you want in a movie, right? Tonal inconsistencies between slapstick cops, parents making pie, or whatever they were doing in that fucking movie, and rape. Great job, Wes Craven. It is a shittily written movie. One of the dumbest horror films I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know if that's a horror movie. It is so not scary at all. It is so terrible on every level that I am stunned that a single human being could possibly watch it and get any semblance of joy out of it. It is not it does not make me feel uncomfortable. Not because I think that watching rape or anything like that is fine or something like that. It's just because it's such a dumb, cartoony way of presenting it that it is so hard for me to believe. That movie is one of the few movies that can actually make me yell at how much I hate it. It is a shockingly... It's not a 1 out of 10 as far as I'm concerned, because I can't understand some of the ways that budget restricted what could have been a fine scene at times, but it is the closest movie, and I have given ones, but it is the closest a movie ever got to being one. It's the lowest 2 I've ever given. A shit movie. It is shit. Basically entirely irredeemable, and if I watched it again, which I will never watch it again, I might actually end up giving it a 1. So that's Last House on the fucking Left. Anyway. The Hills Have Eyes. One of the most boring films I have ever seen in my life. I can understand, I can respect the movie for at least playing on the fear that if you get lost in in an area and maybe somebody is watching you. I can understand that might be an okay concept, but you know what? They didn't do it fucking well. It is a miserably boring movie with characters that I don't give a fuck about. They're some of the most, not even unlikable, just not fun to watch at all characters in a horror movie I've ever seen. Ever. It is amazing how much you don't care. The villains, horribly unmemorable. They are all not interesting to watch, and they're boring. They are just boring. Everything about the movie is boring. It's poorly acted, basically like every other fucking Wes Craven movie I've ever seen. It's terrible, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But anybody who's a fan of Wes Craven at this point would be saying, oh, well, I mean, maybe those you didn't like, but I mean, The Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream are good. It's like an Adam Sandler fan saying, oh, well, I mean, his new movies are bad, but The Water Boy and Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison are good. This guy is the Adam Sandler of horror, almost. I might actually go so far as to say that, except he's had good movies before. But you know what? Adam Sandler has even been in good movies, for God's sake. Fuck. Whatever. Okay, so Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm only talking about the ones that I've seen of his. You know what? It's a good movie. That's it. It's a good movie. It's not great. It is not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's inventive, to be sure. It's a very creative, inventive movie that came up with an idea that was all its own, and it was a smart idea. It's not a smart movie, but it was a smart idea. That does not, and it had a very good soundtrack and a good killer. It had good stuff in it. a lot of good stuff. In fact, I would give it, it had good imagery, and it definitely had its atmosphere at times. It had a couple of creepy moments, and it's probably like a high 6 out of 10 for me. Just because of the things that I mentioned, though, does not take away from the fact that it is incompetently acted by every member of the cast except for Robert Englund and Johnny Depp. It has one of the worst endings to a horror movie of all time. It has problems. It has problems, and if I ever get around to a review with Nightmare on Elm Street with Jesse, I'll get into more of those problems, but it's heavy-handed. It is... there are just things about that movie that I don't really like. So, it's a movie that is, I think people find that it's more important. It's kind of like Halloween. I think people see it as being, and again, another controversial thing to say, but it's like Halloween in that I think the history of the movie and what it did for the genre is a little bit more famous than how good the actual movie is. And Halloween is a better movie than A Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm not going to talk about that right now. So, after A Nightmare on Elm Street came out, I guess Wes Craven finally found, wow, there's actually a movie that I'm one day going to be known for. So, he was like, oh, well, this is my masterpiece, and I'm not letting anybody touch it. And which is why for fucking decades, he, I think it was actually a decade, he complained and bitched and moaned that he did not get any of the, that his vision wasn't exactly given the proper follow-up, or it should never have had any sequels. He constantly complained about the sequels, even though he assisted in writing the third one, or at least wrote an original draft. He complained about them for years, and on one level, I understand. Almost every single movie in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, other than the first one and the third one, and I have a soft spot for the second one because it's a bad movie, but I find it fascinating in how bad it is. The rest of them are shit. Every single other Nightmare on Elm Street movie past 3 is shit. Is complete shit. And on one level, I can understand why he might be mad that was the fucking follow-up to his movie. You don't go out in public and start complaining about it to people and saying how it ruined the integrity of your original brilliant masterpiece, which is kind of funny, isn't it? When you're complaining about the sequels to your Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and then in 2010 you make a movie called My Soul to Take, which completely rips off the plot from Elm Street 2, right? Yeah. I don't even know what to say to that. Moving on. Yeah, you don't say that out in public. You don't say how much you are not a fan of the other movies. But it's fine, because after the 6th Nightmare on Elm Street movie managed to shit upon every single thing that movies can do that are good, Wes Craven was like, all right, I'm gonna come back to make Wes Craven's New Nightmare. No ego in putting your name in the title, right, Wes? Yes, I know John Carpenter did the same thing with a lot of his movies, but his movies aren't called John Carpenter's The Thing or John Carpenter's Halloween. They're usually called the original Halloween or just Halloween, or the original. Well, the original of The Thing is The Thing from Another World. You get the point I'm trying to make. History has basically made it Wes Craven's New Nightmare. No ego in that. Where he made a movie that was good job, Wes Craven. You managed to make a horror movie that is pretentious. I don't even know how you do that. Really, I don't. It's a movie that means nothing. Its themes are not explored enough. It's slow and very uninteresting. Plot points are frequently dropped. I can't even begin to describe how poorly written that movie is, and nothing makes sense for the entire movie. And again, very poorly acted, basically by every member of the cast, including you, Wes Craven. And then after all of that stuff of him, of him constantly complaining because the integrity of his brilliant Nightmare on Elm Street series, after all of that integrity was gone, even though he eventually did admit that, he was mad because he was screwed out of residuals for money that he said that he rightfully pretty much earned for that movie and the sequels. Yeah, quite an artist. He would eventually go and direct the Scream franchise, which, yeah, don't you want the guy that has contempt basically for the horror movie genre as a whole at this point, not only because, well, or just has a well-known dislike for slasher movies and stuff like that and the sequels. Don't you want him directing the fall, like the send up of those movies? Don't you want that? That makes sense, right? So he and the hack Kevin Williamson, who ruined Halloween H2O, got together with a bunch of other people, and they made a self-indulgent, self-important movie called Scream, where they just pointed out to people silly things that happen in horror movies, and apparently people thought that was smart. Guess what? There's nothing smart about pointing out cliches in horror movies. It's not very hard. You're not smart because you do that. And it had a very... There's a lot of problems with Scream, and I don't like that movie. But it has good things. Like, it's basically the only... The Scream series, or at least the first two, are the only movies that Wes Craven, that I've seen, that he's ever been involved with, that has acting that is, at the very least, passable. I mean, God, the acting in his other movies is horrible, but it was okay there, and it had some scenes that had genuine suspense. But by the time you get to the fourth movie, and he's constantly complaining about, and he's just constantly going on bandwagons at that point, and he's just like, oh, well, we shouldn't be making remakes and stuff like that, ruining the integrity of the original, right? Yeah, which is why the original Last House on the Left was a remake of the fucking Virgin Springs, Wes Craven, you fucking fool! My God. So, I hate Wes Craven. I have hated the majority of his movies, and the fact that this man has been considered over time to be a horror master is pig shit. Is pig shit. None of the movies that he has directed have any real... do not earn a rightful spot as being among the horror greats. I like A Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it's a pretty good movie. It's a high 6 out of 10. It is not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, and none of his movies deserve that. I've seen now the movies that of his that are usually considered the ones that have the best reputation. I haven't seen any of his other ones that even people ever bring up, like The People Under the Stairs or Serpent in the Rainbow. Certain people like Serpent in the Rainbow, and I might get around to it one day. Maybe. Not after Shocker. Whatever. But I don't get it. I think he's a hack, quite frankly, and he hasn't made a movie in a few years. I hope it fucking stays that way. I don't want this guy ever directing another fucking movie again. So, after a while, I was pretty mad about Wes Craven in general, and I just kind of saw a couple of his movies, because I wanted to be like, hey, maybe this guy has something, because, I mean, he can't have this reputation just because, like, of these movies. I mean, god damn. So, I saw Last House on the Left, and it was a piece of shit. And I saw Hills Have Eyes, and it was a piece of shit. And I saw Shocker, and guess what? It was a piece of shit. This fucking movie is... I took notes, and I'm gonna have to be referencing them a lot, because... Whoa, God! Is there a lot to talk about in Shocker? Okay. I want to start out with talking about something that is a minor thing to talk about, but it is something that I found very interesting. So during the beginning of the movie, there's a thing with the football players and those guys, and they're having like a football game, and the main character is one of the football players, and he's running around on the field. And as I'm watching this, I'm looking at the movie, and I see that there is an incredibly obvious camera shadow for 2 seconds, 2 whole seconds during this opening football scene. And I'm like, wow, really? Like, you didn't notice? It's very obvious. I mean, it's almost in the entire it looks over here like I'm doing the bottom left hand corner, but it was the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and it's taking up the whole thing. I'm like, Jesus Christ, how did you miss that? It's so obvious that there's a camera shadow there, and then something happens in the movie, and then another camera shadow appears, except this time front and center of the screen, right there, across the entire screen. Camera shadow that does not go away for 6 seconds. I rewound it. I counted how many seconds. 6 seconds of camera shadow right here. This is not a big effects shot. It's not like, oh, we couldn't refilm it. It's a scene where you got actors together to play football. You seriously couldn't do another take of that? Really? Oh my god. Wow. That's pathetic. That's really fucking pathetic. So, I just wanted to get that out of the way now. Let's see. Shocker is a movie, and I'm getting really angry right now, but fuck this movie. Shocker is a movie about a killer who is, like, he's a killer, and for some reason, this football player guy can just sense whenever he's doing things. Why? I don't know. I don't think the movie knows either. So, for some reason, he can just sense when the killer is about to kill, or if the killer is currently killing. It doesn't do a good job of explaining what the fuck. It not only does it not do a good job of explaining what the powers are, but it doesn't do a good job of explaining why he has these psychic powers. This football player kid just knows what Mr. Crazy Man Killer is doing, and he uses his psychic powers with his cop dad. He and cop dad go along, and they're like, okay, we're gonna use your psychic powers to catch Mr. Bald serial killer guy. So they're going around and they're doing that, and then they eventually catch him. And by the way, I'm gonna spoil the shit out of this movie because honestly, fuck this movie. So they eventually catch him and they bring him into the electric chair. But before that, he apparently his last request was he wanted to have a TV set in his room. And what he does is he does a satanic some kind of satanic thing where he prays to the television. I am not kidding about this. And what ends up happening is he does some weird incantation, and like a little spirit thing comes out of the TV and goes into his body. We never learn how he knows about this spirit, because at no point is it ever set up like this is some sort of religious guy or anything like that. This is, it's not even set up in the way that Child's Play did. It was dumb in Child's Play also, but at least it showed that Charles Lee Ray knew a voodoo guy, so he could learn where the fuck to get voodoo spells. How did this guy figure this out? Not only that, but the spirit fucking floats out of the fucking TV and gets sucked into his body, and now he gets electrocuted, and he can possess other bodies, and he can also go into televisions and into other electric appliances, except for when he can't, because this movie is as inconsistent as fuck. So apparently, not only that, they have no idea what this guy can do with his fucking powers. It is so fucking inconsistent in every single way. I mean, like, there's a scene when he possesses a chair. Why did he possess the chair? How did he possess the chair? The last time that I remember, yes, it was a chair that had, like, oh, it was a little... It had, like, some sort of vibrating thing within the chair. It was like a lazy boy. But I don't think that when you possess it, you can make that... I don't think the entire chair is electrical. So it can't sprout hands and start hugging who's ever in it. Fuck you, whoever... Fuck you, Wes Craven. Gee, because he wrote and directed this piece of shit. So... yeah, the psychic powers are never fucking explained. Other shit that's never fucking explained. So main character football guy has a girlfriend who lives with him in high school. I didn't get that at all. It did a really bad job of who lives in whose house, who is old enough in certain situations. I don't know, like, any of the relationships between any of these fucking characters, but the main football player's girlfriend is... hang on a second, Jesus Christ. Okay, so main football player's girlfriend is killed by Mr. Serial Killer guy. So for no reason, she can just be a ghost now and follows him around and follows football player guy around so she can help him on his quest to destroy Mr. Serial Killer. How? Why? When did we ever get any kind of hint of that, she could do that? Why is she doing that? Was there anything about her that was special that could allow her to do such a thing? No! There wasn't! Jesus Christ! So, also, she just has a magic necklace that can just ward him off. I don't know why. What is so special about this magic necklace thing? And how does he know that it affects him? How does the serial killer know that it affects him? Can somebody answer any of these fucking questions for me? Cause the movie doesn't try at all to explain anything. I am so confused for the entire fucking movie, and I don't know what's happening. The main killer, I'm just gonna spend just another thing on him, and then I'm gonna go on to something else. The main killer can possess people. He can possess other people's bodies, and he does that for the middle section of the movie, because the first third of the movie, he's a human being. Second third, he's possessing different bodies. And then the last third, he can just possess electrical equipment. And he never possesses another body again. Which I thought that was weird, because once you want to try to have some sort of integration to make him seem like he's even more powerful, giving some kind of thing where he's doing both at the same time would actually make him seem like he's more of a threat. Not just like, you have him have one power in one section, and then never show that, and then just have another power again, and then he just uses it for one half of the movie, and then another one third of the movie, and another third of the movie. You missed out on an opportunity to make him seem as powerful as possible, you idiots, fuck you! God damn, I'm getting mad at this movie, but it fucking deserves it. This movie sucks. The acting is terrible. This is some of the worst acting in any Wes Craven movie I've seen. I mean, in the Nightmare on Elm Street movie acting, it wasn't very good. It really wasn't. It's actually pretty objectionable slasher movie acting. And the Scream acting was fine, for the most part. I thought, fix this. The Scream acting was fine, for the most part. And the acting in Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes was bad as well, very bad. In fact, some of the, like I said with Last House on the Left, some of the worst I've ever seen, especially with that mother character, Jesus Christ. The acting in every single cast member overacts the fuck out of everything. It is, I have, this main kid, you don't care about him. You don't care about what happens to him in the slightest. Not at all. I don't care about this guy. I don't. I don't care about his dad. I don't care about his girlfriend. I don't care about his coach, his friends, especially, mainly because I think that they just do a shitty job of establishing any of the character relations between any of them. Like, just the football players are all going to help each other out. And I guess, I know there's a camaraderie when you play sports and stuff like that, but it just comes out of nowhere and it's never established. It even feels antagonistic to the other sports members at the beginning of the movie. But anyway, the acting is so bad from everybody. No exceptions. Not a single exception from any single member of the cast. Everybody's awful. They do a terrible job of convincing me of any of the scenes that they're in. And this main guy is annoying to watch. He's constantly yelling at the top of his fucking lungs. Every member of the cast is yelling at the top of their fucking lungs, but this guy is the worst. He overacts everything. But actually, no, the worst is the serial killer who plays such a bland, like, crazy serial killer guy. He just screams and just tries to have catchphrases and stuff like that, and it's just horrible. I hate when movies have serial killers that are really uninteresting and don't have any motive that is fun to watch. Freddy Krueger was good. That was a good one, Wes Craven. You did it before, so you've proven that you can actually do that. What happened? Jesus Christ. So, and another thing that I noticed about this movie is that the serial killer character is, it seems like Wes Craven is trying to get another sort of Nightmare on Elm Street thing going on with the serial killer character, because he constantly is affecting people while they're dreaming. There's things and it's nowhere near as well done as it's done in A Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's like he's constantly playing with reality and what's happening while you're sleeping, and this guy, you can attack him in the vision, and you can affect him, and he can attack you in the vision, and he can affect you. It's so obvious that Wes Craven not only is just going right back to his Nightmare on Elm Street roots in a bad way, because he's not doing it well this time, but because it's so obvious, as far as I'm concerned, that he is trying to set up for another major slasher movie franchise guy. This guy, is this really the character you want to set up a franchise around? He's so uninteresting and boring. He's not fun to watch at all. There's nothing interesting about him, and a main reason why I say that is because I have this line written down because it was so fucking bad. He's given puns like Freddy Krueger. At one point, he grabs the protagonist's like head or something, and he's like, "How about you take a ride in my Volkswagen?" Because he has electricity now, like electricity powers. Really? That's the pun you're gonna go with? Wow. Writing, everybody. Writing from the master of horror right there. Fuck me, this movie's bad. It's Wes Craven just trying to make up for another thing, like, oh, I didn't get any money off this, so I'll just make another horror movie villain and I'll get you guys back. Jesus. Let's see. This movie feels incredibly long. I mean, you know what? It's long enough for a horror movie. Horror movies usually are about 90 minutes long, and yes, there are obvious exceptions to the rule where slower paced horror movies like The Shining or something like that. There's a reason why those are the length that they're at. There is no fucking reason for Shocker to be at the length that it's at. It's an hour 50 minutes of boring, repetitive scenes of constantly, like, the killer breaking into his house, of the killer, it's just a bunch of times of the main character, like, walking into another house after he thinks that a family's about to be killed, and then Again, he fights the killer, and then another scene of that again, and then again he fights the killer, and then another scene of him coming into another house, and then again he fights the killer, and then another scene of him going into another house, and he fights the killer again. This happens like 7 times, and it's so boring. It's not even good the first time, but it's so boring and repetitive. God. And this movie isn't scary either. There's not a single fucking second of this movie that builds genuine tension. There are scenes where things go quiet and it's moving the camera so that way like a character will be over here in this side of the frame, but he'll like just be in frame so that way when the camera moves there'll be another fucking character there for a jump scare. Well, that didn't happen often enough. That's not fair. At least Wes Craven didn't do that. Thank God. But there's nothing about this movie that builds atmosphere. This movie is... I feel gross calling this a horror movie. This is not a fucking horror movie. It's a farce. It's a farce. The ways that certain scenes are set up, it actually seems like it's going for comedy. Really. And you know what? Whenever it tries to be funny, it's not funny. I remember there are scenes when, at the end, and I'll get to that eventually, but it's not funny. But there's a scene when they're running through the park, and I get that there are sections of the movie that are going for comedy, and I guess somebody that likes this movie somehow could make the argument that this scene is going for comedy, but it's only funny because it's so incompetently shot. The main character and the possessed police officer are running through the park, but it's so dumbly filmed. Like, it'll just be a shot of one guy running away, and then the same shot of another guy, and then, like, they cut to the same angle of another guy running in the same direction. They feel like they're drunkenly falling over, and it's pathetic. It is seriously just pathetic, the way that this movie is shot at times. I already said the thing with the camera shadow, and by the way, on the camera shadow, you know what? Plan 9 from Outer Space had the boom mic at the top of the fucking of the screen for about maybe 3 seconds. This was center frame in the fucking movie for like 6 seconds, and you couldn't do another take of that. Nobody ever fucking mentions that. Fuck this movie. God, I'm getting really mad at this. The angel of the girlfriend, I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but constantly just saves him out of nowhere. And I actually think I did mention this before, but I didn't mention how it's just like she just comes in whenever the killer's about to kill the protagonist and just saves him. How? I don't know. I don't know. It didn't make any sense. Give me a second. The soundtrack to this movie also is terrible. Every time that a kill happens in the movie, it has this horrible, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre synthed up, like, clanging of synth music on, like, a piano, and that's not me knocking the Texas Chainsaw Massacre soundtrack. That's a good, technically that's an effective soundtrack, but it's just like clanging on synth instruments or something like that. It's horrible. Horrible. One of the worst things sometimes about the 80s can be the soundtracks and like how synthy they can be and how corny and distracting and dated they can be. And this movie does not disappoint with bringing out the worst aspects of the fucking 80s. Jesus Christ. Let's see. Yeah. This movie, as bad as this movie was, up until that point, I was not prepared for the ending. The ending is the guy prays to his girlfriend, let me also have the ability to jump into TVs, and guess what? It works. They fight each other by jumping into different channels. And I guess you could say that that's comedy, maybe. But you know what? It's not funny. It's pathetic. Especially considering the fact that this movie has some pretty dated fucking special effects, especially the lightning effects are very bad, and whenever somebody, especially when the killer jumps through the TV, he just looks very bad. But as bad as that is, there's a scene that I do want to talk about, in terms of how I was just stunned that they even did this. So as they're jumping through the channels, they cut to this main character as he's like fighting the serial killer, and he's jumping through the channels at the end of the movie. They cut to coverage of the Hindenburg, like yeah, no, yeah. Honest to God, I don't even have the ability to put into words how offensive that is. Like, that's actually a serious thing that happened. Like, people actually fucking died during that. Okay? And people fucking died. Alright? But, you know what, Wes Craven? Fuck you. Fuck you. It's not fucking funny at all. You don't fucking put that shit in your comedy. In a comedy scene. It's not fucking funny. Fucking douchebag. Jesus Christ. So, in the middle of all this, they're jumping through the TVs and they're punching and kicking and just repeating more fight after fight after fight after fight. And it's just so flatly shot, so boring that I just don't care. I do not give a fuck about anything that's happening anymore. Not that I ever fucking did, but I'm just, like, in active revolt, like, praying to God to let this movie end. And then just, like, the main character apparently had a plan all along, that he was going to shut the power off, and the plan is so terribly explained, I don't even want to go into it. But they don't set it up in a good enough way. I mean, they have a scene of his football friends like, oh, go to the generator and be prepared to turn it off at midnight. How does that get the killer stuck inside the TV? How does that make it effective for you to pause the villain? The protagonist gets a remote, points it at the villain, and pauses the villain. And he I'm not kidding about this. He rewinds him to play out all of his previous murders to make him feel bad about it. And to be like, don't you feel bad about this, Mr. Crazy Serial Killer? Look at all of the hate and the torment that you have caused these mean people. I am not even kidding. Somebody wrote this. Somebody wrote this on a fucking piece of paper and put it down, submitted it, and filmed it, and left it in their movie. This movie blows ass. This is one of the worst fucking horror movies I have ever seen. Really? Okay, I'm just gonna check over this one more time to see if there's anything I fucking missed. Jesus Christ. Oh, yes. Two things. I want to mention the good things, and I want to mention how bad the score is in addition to the synth music. There is a lot of rock music in the soundtrack. It's terribly out of place, and it's a soundtrack that tries to make the movie seem cooler than it actually is, which is not cool at all because this movie is a sack of pig shit. And it's distracting. It's really distracting. But the good things in the movie, when the serial killer is possessing the different bodies, I will give it this. I think I like that the serial killer at one point possessed the little girl, because that is the kind of movie that this is. It's midnight movie trash. And you know what? I respect that they did that, because it just proves that they're trying to be a little tasteless. It's different from the Hindenburg thing because you don't fucking reference shit where people actually really die. That's not cool. That's not cool at all. But I appreciate that they're trying to go for the gonzo, like, over the top. We're just pulling all the strings and we're just doing that. I respected that. and I thought they did it was an okay job with it. The makeup is fine as well. Some of the makeup, like there's a scene when the serial killer, like somebody's giving him mouth to mouth after the TV fucking possesses him. Jesus Christ, this movie's dumb. And he bites the guy who's trying to give him CPR, like his lip, and he bites it, and for some reason his lip turns into like Play-Doh, and it like goes from here all the way, and like pretend my head is stationary, but my lip is down to here. It like turns into like Play-Doh, but it was an effective shot. It made me go, ugh. Like it's one of the few times that any movie's ever made me do that. So I'll give it credit for doing that. And some of the other makeup is fine. It's fine. And there are times when it's shot like a normal movie is supposed to fucking look. But other than that, man, wow. This movie's fucking terrible. Never watch it. It is one of the worst Wes Craven movies I've seen. I would put this right there with you know what? Actually, this is worse than Last House. Not Last House on the Left. It'd have to fucking try to be worse than that movie. This is worse than The Hills Have Eyes. The Hills Have Eyes may have been more boring, but this movie is worse. The Hills Have Eyes had some minor redeeming qualities. It had a better idea for terror in general. This movie has basically nothing. The things that I mentioned, they're very minor. Well, actually, the makeup and the way it's shot is something, and the little girl thing is a little moment. This movie is just it's shit. Master of Horror, my ass. The final verdict for Shocker is a mildly high 2 out of 10. A ridiculous, terrible, 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 terrible movie, and I hated it. Recently I saw with Jesse, who I did those the Transformers reviews with. I did a review. No. We saw The Zookeeper because we wanted something to make fun of. When I can't honestly tell what is worse, either Zookeeper with Kevin James or this movie. Wow. Yeah.